Today, I'm going to be giving you a summary of the story that has been presented in Arc Raiders thus far. I want you to keep in mind that this is just my perspective. I'm not deep in the trenches of lore hunting in the Reddit and Discord, so I'm not bringing you some cumulative knowledge of everything that everyone knows about Arc Raiders. This is my personal experience with the game and my kind of conclusion that I've come to after doing all the quests, upgrading everything, and playing all the maps a bunch of times. Also, I want to say that this doesn't include the upcoming potential story details that we will probably definitely get from the new map Stella Montis. And the Stella Montis map has a pretty cool live event going on right now. So, I recommend if you're a raider, jump onto Arc today or tomorrow and try to donate as much as you can towards opening up the tubes that will take us past the Blue Gate far north to Stella Montis so we can uncover whatever mysteries are there. With all that being said, I'm going to do this video like this. I'm going to start with the general history overview, then I'm going to talk about the traders, then I'm going to talk about the maps and what we learned from the environmental storytelling there. So let's get into it. To start with the general history, you have to understand that the story of Arc Raiders is currently broken down into 5 eras. The first era that we know about is called the Collapse, and it represents when the ecological demise of the Earth occurred. It became apparent to humanity that the Earth was no longer going to be able to sustain human life, probably from all the pollution and terrible things that we did to it, and thus this led into the Exodus era, where in response, humanity decided to build a bunch of spaceships and send humanity into space to survive the collapse of the Earth. This led to the Sunrise Era, where after many generations of the people who were left behind on Earth having lived underground, it became apparent that the Earth was now sustaining life again. Plants were beginning to grow, and thus people were able to return back topside and start establishing communities and living in the sun again, no longer forced to be mole people. Unfortunately, this well-lived era did not last very long, as the Ark, these horrible robot monstrosities, seemingly hell-bent on killing any human they encountered, first started to appear during the first wave. Plummeting from the skies, humanity was forced to fight, and fight they did. Combining forces, they joined up, and at the Battle of Victory Ridge, they were able to defeat that initial Ark invasion by sheer willpower, brute strength, and a handful of weapons. Unfortunately, the end of this first wave did not result in human harmony, as many of the groups of raiders who teamed up to repel the Ark ultimately blamed each other for certain tactical failures and the deaths of loved ones and other soldiers who were fighting alongside them, and thus they splintered into different factions. This leads into the second wave. After that initial victory, the Ark would shortly arrive again, and now separated into different factions living in communities underground, we see ourselves in Toledo, specifically a section of the city known as Speranza. These underground communities are separated by rubble and distance and connected via an underground tube system with high-speed transport pods that are controlled by the official Toledo Tubes management people. These tubes were built during the Exodus period and are now being utilized to send raiders topside as well as between these other communities. With that summary of the historical situation that's occurred around us, let's talk about the traders, as these are the people who give us the quests in Arc Raiders and largely push forward the narrative that us, as an individual raider, is experiencing inside of the game. We'll start with Shawnee. Shawnee runs security for Speranza. She monitors both the inside and outside. She looks at topside cameras. She picks up feeds of different sensors and largely is awaiting the Ark threat and trying to gather enough intelligence to determine what their next move is going to be. She isn't necessarily the leader of Speranza, as that position kind of falls on the next trader we'll talk about, but she is very pivotal to daily operations, and without her, I wouldn't think that we would be able to achieve as much success as a larger community. She sends us on quests to figure out what the Ark's next move is going to be, and through gathering intel, setting up new monitoring devices, and doing a bunch of other things for her, we learn that a new large Ark threat is inbound, possibly tied to this new map that we're going to be playing very shortly, Stella Montis, or maybe some larger reveal that will come later down the road. The next traitor that we're going to talk about is Celeste. Celeste is, like I said, the de facto leader of the group. She fought in the Battle of Victory Ridge and has since become very jaded from the trauma of that experience because the raider groups that teamed up fractured after the battle. The quests that we do with her see us reigniting her hope that humanity can pull together and win this fight, and we see her stepping more strongly into a leadership role by kind of lifting up her fellow community. She helps Chan Win kind of overcome the loss of her mother, which we'll talk about later. And she seems to be kind of doing operations that are getting the band back together and hopefully creating a stronger Speranza. And once again, our part in reigniting Celeste's flame to be a pivotal leader for the anti-Ark movement is raising raider flags, fixing memorial sites, and gathering old war journals and memorabilia for her. Next, we'll talk about John Wynn, who is the gun vendor. She is a tactical whiz kid because her mother was Major Ava. Ava was a pivotal leader at the battle for Victory Ridge, who also passed away there. She is very closed off and even stays locked behind this door when we interact with her, clearly impacted by losing her family at such a young age to the Ark. Her quests see us helping her establish a stronger network for her arms dealing operation, and ultimately, through what we do for her and Celeste, we see her come around more to the idea of helping out the team here in Speranza and trusting those by her side to combat the Ark threat. Now let's talk about Lance. Lance is the medic trader, and arguably the kind of person who I'm most interested in seeing expanded upon in additional story content. He is an enigma to everyone in Speranza, a robot that lives amongst us, and no one really seems to question it. It could be that it's kind of this unspoken common knowledge that humans used to have friendly bots. We do see on some of the maps some robots that are not hostile towards us, who are like kind of half broken and similar in structure to Lance, which I'll talk about more when we're going over the environmental storytelling in the maps later on. Or it could be that people are so confused and off-put by him that they just accept the fact that he has medical expertise and move on with their days as they're living in a dystopia. Lance's quests see us helping him connect with his human side. We go to a pharmacist's home, for example, and look at items of value to him, and his little codex entry even says that he's worried about his feng shui. So I think Lance kind of grappling with his human side and exploring what it means to be this seemingly sapient robot in a world that is run by humans fighting off robots is where his story is heading, but we largely don't get a lot of conclusions as to what's going on with him just yet. Next, let's talk about Apollo. He is the grenade and gadget trader, and arguably the chillest dude in Speranza, probably. He's very good-spirited, and we learn that he's lived in multiple underground settlements and seems to have a better understanding of the relationship between Speranza, the official Toledo 2's management people, and other settlements. Quests with him see us helping to improve the quality of life for citizens of Speranza, and we also learn from his codex entry that he's an avid reader, so it makes sense that he sends us over to the library in Buried City to get some magazines and books for the citizens. Alright, now let's talk about the maps and what kind of environmental storytelling details we've gained from them. First is Dam Battlegrounds, because it's the first map that you played. This takes place at the Alcantara Dam, which, like I said earlier, was just around where the Battle of Victory Ridge occurred, which ended the first wave. This map shows us the devastation of what a true Ark battle really looks like on a very large scale, and we also get to see some structures that popped up in different eras, giving us further insight into how operations occurred prior to the second wave, which is the one we're playing then. The next map is Buried City, and I feel that largely this map is meant to show life before the collapse and give it a stronger connection to kind of real-world Italy, which is where the game takes place, just a far-flung dystopian version. We also get to see, kind of like on Damn Battlegrounds, how different eras introduced new structures topside. It's ruins all the way down, which is a cool aesthetic when you're looking at these apartments, which once held people that were probably very similar to how we lived. And on top of those are raider structures and probably structures from the Sunrise era that were people trying to reemerge and reclaim the topside of the Earth. We also know that the city was originally called Murano, but that name has not been used in quite a while. Next, let's talk about Blue Gate. And while it is the last map that you unlock, I don't think that it's the most important, which I believe is the spaceport, so we'll talk about that next. This is the newest area that raiders have begun to have access to, and it's fitting that it's named this since we see that conquering this area will give raiders access to the mountainous region that's just north of it. And the upcoming map, Stella Montis, is just north of here, so it makes sense that this is our gateway to additional maps, locations, and content. Largely, the map is filled with kind of old remnants of society prior to the collapse, and we do see this large underground tunnel section where it seems like people were evacuating, hopefully, probably to get to the Exodus and leave from here. And like I said earlier, these tunnels are where we see a lot of these robots that are very similar in structure to Lance, seemingly implying that humanity was very reliant on robots for tasks as simple as loading the car, funneling people out and away from an evacuation zone, or maybe even constructing some of the structures that we'll see when we talk about the spaceport here in a second. We also see a lot of old remnants of larger arcs that were sent down to the Earth here, just like in Damn Battlegrounds, actually. And we can kind of deduce that these Ark are using these harvesting machines to gather resources from Earth and take them to wherever they're coming from, which we know is outside of the actual Earth itself, because they come from space. So this also paints a clearer picture about the Ark's intentions, as we now understand that the materials that we have here on Earth are valuable to wherever they're going. This will all kind of tie together when we talk about the next map, which is the Acera spaceport. This is where humanity left from, where the Exodus came to its conclusion when the massive Ark ships, I'm referring to them as Ark ships, but not like the literal Ark themselves, but I'm kind of realizing as I'm saying it that maybe there is this dual meaning where, like Noah's Ark, the Ark ships left with humanity to preserve life, and now the Ark that are coming back to Earth are referred to as Ark because of how they look on the screen, monitoring them as they arc back down to the planet, as they enter the atmosphere. So take that as you will, as I think about it in this moment. But the spaceport map is kind of the most pivotal location because I think it's the crux of what the larger story being told is. That humanity, or some privileged fraction of it, left the planet on these massive vessels and is now located somewhere else in the universe. Now, whether that's right above our heads, a different planet, or somewhere else entirely, is not entirely known at this moment. Although there is one little hint that I think was a major story detail revealed in the Stella Montis trailer that we just got to reveal this new event, but I'll talk about that at the very end. Here we see the remains of what's left of this massive shipbuilding facility, and we also see more of these robots that I talked about seeing at Blue Gate, further indicating that humanity relied on these robots to create the massive structures that we use to get off planet, also indicating that our relationships with the bots, at least in some capacity elsewhere, is probably relatively positive in the sense that we were controlling them to do our bidding. If you watched my first video that I did talking about my early thoughts on the story of our creators so far, you'll know that basically this is the mainline narrative component that I'm interested in, as understanding what these humans are doing and why potentially they're behind the Ark attacks, or maybe were overthrown by the Ark, realizing that they are being utilized by a tool, is going to be kind of the interesting element that unwinds as the story plays out. And as we learn more, I'm becoming seemingly more convinced that it probably is humans behind these attacks, which I think is an interesting thing to grapple with for the people of Speranza who have spent so much time battling the Ark. Imagine when they have to come to terms with the fact that their true enemy is a handful of humans far away from them, leading this robotic force that is slaughtering them. Overall, the story of Ark seems to be how we as individuals come together to oppose the threat as a team here in Speranza, and also uncover what that threat truly is. Who is actually behind the Ark that are being sent down to Earth? And what are their end goals? Why are they harvesting resources from us? And why is Lance one of these last robots alive and seemingly very friendly? These are all subtle clues that I think are, once again, indicating that humans are the real threat to the Raiders in Ark, and not our fellow human brethren in other neighborhoods in Toledo, but whatever elite class of people got to actually flee the Earth prior to the devastation that occurred here. I think that the story overall is in an interesting spot because while I don't think that it's one of the more compelling sci-fi narratives that have been presented in a game recently, I am so engaged with the game itself that I'm interested to see where it goes. And I do feel like there's a lot of potential to expand in ways that are compelling, like I said, by further exploring the true origin point of the Ark and uncovering some nuanced details about the events that we already know about. With that being said, there are three ways that I think they could improve the story to really make it a much better experience. And I think that they're pretty realistic. First thing, make the quest more meaningful. Like, I'm not going to get into it really here. If you want to hear my thoughts on the quests in Arc Raiders, check out my video from a few days ago. But the quests are kind of disappointing in their presentation and what they offer the player right now. And I think that needs to be changed. And I think there's some realistic changes I lay out in that video that could be done to enhance that experience. Secondly, get voice actors to perform the quest bits. Now, I know this is kind of a hot topic issue right now on the back end of the Eurogamer review bringing the overall critical score for the game down, or, whatever. I'm not really even talking about this as a moral issue. It's more so that it doesn't sound good. The actual voice lines for the quests don't sound great. They don't sound authentic. They're not synced up with the character animations in any way. I think just getting a person to come in and read, I don't know, like ultimately, what is it, like 2,000 words maybe for each character? Seems like something that is doable in the context of presenting the story. And I do understand the argument for the text-to-speech on the, conditional pings. Although in my head, it does seem possible to just get people to call out or, read out those words. But regardless, I just think it's a quality thing. The quality of the voice acting in those areas, which I guess it's not even fair to call it voice acting. The quality of the voice audio that we're hearing in the quest is very low, and it does kind of draw you out of caring about the experience, especially alongside the other stuff going on with the quests. And the last thing that I think they absolutely, I don't understand why this isn't in there. Honestly, this might be a blind spot for me, and it is in there. And if it is, please let me know in the comments that I've just missed it. But make the cutscenes available to watch in the codex entry for the quests. We have access to all the quests, and we can read the blurb that's in there for all of them. Why can't we watch the cutscenes again? That would be a great addition to the codex. And it seems like such a no-brainer that I think I might just be missing it. But nonetheless, if it's not there, that is something very easy for them to include, and I don't see why they're not doing it. Overall, I'm hopeful that the story will become something that is more engaging, and realistically, the thing that's going to be driving me to experience the story is how fun the gameplay is, and I enjoy, continually going on these raids and seeing what else the game has to offer. Whether or not they choose to actually pursue doing something more interesting with the narrative, I think is to be seen. It does seem clear to me that, like, it's not a big goal or like a main focus of Embark right now. And like I've said in all my other videos, that's completely fine. Just me as an individual, I connect a lot with stories and games. And so it's something that I would like to see. But at the end of the day, if it's not something that they're going to go in that direction with, the game is still a great multiplayer, fun time experience. And I recommend you check it out. And, something else that Michael Veselovsky had said when we were streaming the other day is that Arc Raiders feels, or maybe he didn't say exactly this, but my interpretation, right, is that Arc Raiders for me is kind of like DayZ, the kind of, I played very early on, like initial release DayZ a very long time ago, and I hadn't really connected the two dots, but that is the vibe I get. I like exploring the sandbox and making connections with people and having goofy interactions is like such an incredible experience that those emergent stories that you have obviously are going to outshine the story that Embark is presenting, despite the fact that I think there's somewhere cool they can go with it. And I think that's kind of like maybe one of the stronger selling points I've heard about the game so far. And finally, I do want to include, although I don't have a lot to say about it, I think it is a very, very key detail, though, is that in the Stella Montes trailer that I talked about earlier, we do get to see a picture which is like on a wall, maybe like in one of the tunnels or something, of one of the Ark ships that left during the Exodus. And in there, we see that it says that it's taking people into orbit. So I do think that that's potentially a very key piece of information to understand the larger idea about what is happening with these people. If they're just truly orbiting the Earth, living off the resources that they have on the ship, and waiting to come back down to Earth once it's habitable again, that kind of basically explains the entire situation with the Ark. They are sending the Ark down to gather resources and then having them come right back up into orbit where people are waiting just above us to live their best life free of being attacked from robots. And eventually, once the Earth is safe enough for them or they have whatever they need, they're probably going to come back down. And I think that if way later down the road they explore that idea and we see ourselves like dropping into a map and there's other human PvE enemies there for us to fight that have, I don't know, advanced laser guns or something crazy, that could be really, really excellent. And it also explains why the arc between the first wave and the second wave have changed so much. And it also indicates that they probably know that they're sending the Ark to fight people down here, and thus one of their goals is to do this genocide on the citizens who are left here on Earth prior to returning, probably so there isn't a conflict between them as they just left and lived their best life in orbit for the past few generations. I think that's a pretty key detail that we saw in the Stella Montes trailer. I don't know if people have picked that apart or learned more from it yet, but definitely I think something to look into when we finally unlock the Stella Montes map, which I'll probably be doing a follow-up video about what we learned from the Stella Montes quest line and also the environmental details in there. So please consider hanging out around the channel in whatever way you can here on YouTube if you're interested in that. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Let me know your thoughts on Arc Raiders in the comments. I appreciate you. All right, goodbye. Have a good one. Bye, bye, bye.